Well, hello and welcome. I'm John Hale, the Strategy Guy. In this program, I interview interesting people that are helping to create a brighter future. My special guest today is Bryan, the money mentor. On the topic of aging, Bryan will share with us how we can take meaningful steps with our health, wealth, and relationships as we age. Welcome, Bryan.
Thank you, John.
How are you?
Oh, I'm excellent, thanks.
Oh, that's good.
Very good.
It's good to hear. Please tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing to help people create a brighter future.
Well, I've spent all my life, my adult life anyway, either working for money or with money. And I've come to the conclusion that if we can take money off the table as an issue for people, it makes life a lot easier. So I've been an accountant, a financial planner, I've owned and operated all sorts of different businesses, and I've had my little mishaps, so I think I know a little bit about money at this stage, particularly when you get to this stage of life.
Terrific. And I note from your accent, and I know a little bit about your background, Bryan, that you sound like you come from the land of the leprechauns island, is that right?
Yeah, well, I had to leave because I'm a bit big to be a leprechaun, so I left. But yes, I'm Irish, and I came to Australia in '84, so I'm here 37 years now.
And I'm curious to find out a little bit about your early experiences with money and what you learned about life. Is there anything you can share in terms of...
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, but I suppose I grew up in somewhat straitened circumstances, would be the nice way to put it. But I think the defining moment was my mother died unexpectedly when I was 14.
Wow.
I was the oldest at home, and my dad couldn't even afford to pay for her funeral.
Wow.
And the family got split up for a period of time because he couldn't afford a housekeeper. So I realised then money was an issue.
Yeah, that'd do it. Wow, what you were 14. That's a big experience to have at a foundational stage of life. I'm interested in the link between health and wealth in terms of aging, and in my experience, in the work that I've done, that I've had a number of very highly wealthy midlife clients, and what I see them as being financially very successful, but oftentimes they suffer from significant physical health challenges around weight, fitness and disease. So my first question really is, what has been your experience with human health, and how should people get the balance right so that they're healthy, wealthy and wise?
Okay. Well, John, I've always believed that the body and the mind is one complete system. And regarding health, there's probably three components I see in it. The first is have some regular exercise and have some rest. And the more you exercise, the more you got to rest and get your diet straight. And I think for me, life's easier if you just do it with three things that you have to worry about. So getting those things on a regular basis and making sure you do them regularly is the key.
Yeah, that's good advice. There's lots of information out there now confirming that idea that we need to be regular in what we do, because that really helps us. That's great. And in terms of your own experience, when I tried to contact you in the past, you've been away on bushwalks and adventure hikes. Why do you do that?
Well, for a long time I was what I call an imposter runner. So I used to run half marathons and things like that. And, the listeners can't see me, but I'm not exactly a slim Jim. I mean, I'm not overweight, severely overweight, but I'm big. So I was an imposter runner for a long time and decided I wanted to do a hill walk in Italy. So I thought, well, I need to get some practice with this thing, so I'll join a bushwalking club. Now, the first day out, I realized that hill walking and bushwalking are two completely different things. Bushwalking can be rough, but what I found was that it actually got me back in touch with nature.
Yes.
And that exercising when you're walking, I wasn't on a march anymore, I was on a walk.
Yeah.
I got in touch with nature. I'm not exactly saying I'm a tree hugger, but I do touch them when I go by, and I love being in the rainforest and places like that. So that was one part of it. The other thing is exercise, we all know, is good for your mental health.
Yes.
So I found that it really helped me in that area, and I made some lovely new friends.
Very nice. Yes. Good. Well, thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. That's a lot of us do this exercise on these treadmills and things like that, but there's a whole new other experience if we're prepared to take our exercise into the nature, which is great. It seems to me that there are as many behaviours around money and health as there are people on the planet. And I know that you, as a practical, in quote, psychologist, is someone who understands this, and that you help people to see their unconscious automatic patterns around money and relationships. Are you able to share how sort of this personality profiling that you offer people can help?
Well, I think the biggest thing, John, is to understand yourself and why things are a problem for you.
Okay.
Now, that was my whole thing about money. It took me many, many years. I worked out what to do, but I didn't work out why it worked. And I also had to realize the things that got in the way. So to me, behavioral analysis or behavioral profiling is all about understanding why things are difficult or why they're easy, and creating the environments from that. Whether it be to do with money or people, that you create the right environments to make life easy.
Yeah, and I understand that's part of what you offer your clients. That people come and work with you, that's part of what they get, an understanding of their dynamics. And
because to understand yourself is the key. You're the only person that can change. You can't change anybody else.
Yeah.
And understand your behavior and know why you're getting upset or why you're splurging money at the wrong time. It helps you stop it in the future.
Very wise words. So what are some bad money behaviours that you typically see in, say, some of your clients? And what are some good behaviours and habits that people can adopt?
Well, I think the typical bad ones are doing things for other people's reasons. So an example of that would be, you have a budget. And by the way, I hate that word, and I very seldom use that. I prefer to use the description planned expenditure, right? So you're a bit tight for money, and you get a phone call on a Thursday from friends saying, how about we go out to dinner Saturday night? And you know, because you don't want to be antisocial, you say, go. And suddenly another $150 has gone onto the credit card bill. So I see that as one and that applies in businesses too. People take on undertakings or projects, or even customers that are going to be unprofitable. So they're doing things for the wrong reasons. Have a goal and test everything against whatever your goal is, not what somebody else's goal is.
Yeah.
That to me is the big thing about money.
Yeah. Sound advice, having a goal so you behave around that goal. Now, one of the 6 megatrends I share with my conference audiences when they're thinking about strategy is the increasing rate of human aging around the globe. So my question really is, what does in this sort of increasing aging mean for society and the economy when you look out and you see, you know, every year people are getting older? What sort of some of the things that are happening around that you can see from your experience?
Well, there's a lot of work being done in recent times by governments and other institutions, which I see as more, you know, the macro level, looking down. So I think one of the things that come up is the concept now of the 100-year life, where people are going to live and work a lot longer. It's going to have a portfolio of careers, which people, and look, I'm in my 70s, but I still work willingly. My best friend's a plumber. He works willingly. He doesn't want to go out every day, but so I think you need a purpose in life, and that's one of the things that has to be taken into account in this whole thing of aging and ageism. Now, we've got to be aware of something. There are big risks the longer we're in anything. So there's a paradigm risk in terms of how investments change, how health changes, and how the support services we have change. So if you go into retirement too early and you're reliant on things staying the same, well, we just have to look at life, even at the moment, you know, with COVID, that it doesn't work that way.
We need to be strategic right through, and we can't just fall asleep at the wheel, even though we've got another 20 or 30 years to go. Yeah, this is highlighted to me because my grandfather had a very purposeful life until he was 62, and he retired after working 6 days a week his whole life, and he had a heart attack 3 months later. And I was talking to a friend of mine recently who knows some of the partners of some of these big accounting firms in the world, and it's not uncommon for a partner to retire on this huge payout that comes from being a partner in one of these big firms. But they don't last more than 2 or 3 years, some of them, once they retire, because they don't have a purpose beyond this big purpose that they've been pursuing. So that resonates. It really resonates what you're sharing. So we need a plan for 100 years, not 65 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need a plan to live not retire.
Yes, yes.
That's the way it's summed up.
That's what's echoing very loudly from what you're sharing. So what about retirement? What sorts of options do you find most people are taking when they do retire, and how does that contrast with what you think people should do in terms of what we've just talked about? Are people taking heed of that wisdom, or do you think there are too many people that aren't understanding that retirement paradigm?
I think there's a sort of a split. There are those that have had good jobs and been in good superannuation or pension schemes, so they retire and financially they're well off. They're what's called self-funded to a large degree. They'll have these big superannuation balances, whereas you got other people and who have very low superannuation balances because they didn't have good schemes or they didn't earn a lot of money. And those people tend to take the path of least resistance. So age pension is their big thing. I'm concerned that long term that's not sustainable. As with an aging population, we can't afford the same levels of payout. So it's a combination of those two things. Now, there's also in recent last 3 years, there's been a thing available in Australia called a pension loan scheme, where people can borrow half the age pension every year on their home. And it's a reverse mortgage in effect. And they don't have to pay it off till they die, which means they don't actually have to pay it off. It comes out of the kids' inheritance. Yes. So people are starting to take advantage of those sort of schemes. But also, as people are healthier going into retirement, they're now beginning to realise that, I should work 1 or 2 days a week. Yeah. I should, get that extra money that's going to give you a holiday or whatever it might be. But the statistics are still out there that over 60% of people are reliant on some form of age pension in retirement.
Yeah. Okay. So we need a big change in mindset around that if people are going to stay healthier and wealthier and wise right through.
Yeah, and we need to plan better.
Yeah. So what about relationships in terms of like couples and that sort of thing? How important is wealth when it comes to relationships? And do you have any recommendations for couples in relation to finance and wealth and this sort of thing?
Well, I think it was Groucho Marx that said, when poverty comes in the door, love flies out the window.
Yeah, right.
And there was a fair degree of truth in what he said. Now, I experienced an event over 20 years ago which did put a strain on my relationship at the time, but I managed to get myself back on the horse, financially. But I think the biggest mistake with couples is they don't talk about money.
Oh, okay.
They don't sit down. And now, I don't go along with Scott Pape, the barefoot investor, when he suggests we have date nights to talk about money. I think we should have money meetings and leave the dates for something more enjoyable.
That's a good one. Yes.
And I ask people how often do they have regular money meetings, couples, and often I'll get the answer, well, we don't have regular money meetings, we have irregular money fights.
Yeah.
And that's that whole thing. If you can take money off the table in the relationship, have a conversation about money, have a regular conversation about money, and respect that each of us are different.
Yes.
Some of us like to spend more, some of us like to spend less, some of us like to socialise. It's the old introvert, extrovert thing.
Yeah, that's true. Wow. And coming back to couples so that they don't fight, what are some things couples in financial hardship can do to take care of themselves?
Well, the first thing is have a conversation about the money. And I think it's important for those serious conversations that we don't have them at home. Oh. We go to some neutral venue like a coffee shop, because we don't want to anchor painful conversations about anything in the home, because then we don't want to go home. So I have these conversations outside, and be prepared to try something new. So you can set anything excess you have, even if it doesn't produce a lot of money. The feeling you're in control, you're actually doing something about your problem.
Yes.
Right? The next thing is to get rid of any inhibitions you have about working, and do anything. Become an Uber driver. Even if it's only going to produce an extra $100 a week, what does it matter? Again, you're feeling in control.
Yes.
babysit, do anything you can to generate money.
Yes.
Because that feeling that you're in control, that you're not, there's a whole science, the whole science of scarcity. There was a book written a couple of years ago by blokes from Harvard, of course, and they investigated this whole thing of scarcity, and scarcity of money and scarcity of time, but particularly scarcity of money. It means we lead unfulfilled lives, and we actually make bad decisions because of this feeling of scarcity. So do something to feel you're in control. And of course, the biggest thing is to lower your expectations, and don't compare yourself to anybody else.
Yes, good advice there. So not comparing is helpful. Having the money conversation outside the intimate space, and that's smart because you're working on the problem, not in it. A step towards the solution is a step towards positive change in terms of finding another way to bring some income, because getting control is what I hear saying is the important thing, because when we're out of control, that's when we really suffer.
Yeah, because you know, John, in business particularly, that there's a saying that action precedes clarity. Mm-hmm. So by taking any of those steps,
yes,
it puts you in the right frame of mind, yeah, to make better decisions, yeah, on your options.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't sit there and worry, get going. Yes, when the going gets tough. Now there is a quote I like, and I've heard it many times: a business mortgage over one's home casts a shadow even on the sunniest field. So my question is, should business owners, given there's been a lot of struggle for businesses, and there probably will be post-pandemic as we come out of this pandemic, towards the end of the pandemic, should the business owners that have had a really tough time, should they borrow against their home to prop up their businesses given these extraordinary times?
If you were holding a gun to my head,
yes,
answer that in one line, I'd say no, they shouldn't do it. Now, there'll be exceptions to every rule. But the reason I say no, you shouldn't do it is that you're in effect, in a lot of cases, going to throw good money after bad.
Okay.
If the business has got itself into a state because it couldn't control things, how will it control things afterwards just because it gets more money? Now, there could be the case where it's, the pandemic's an example. If you're really sure of a date when it's going to end, mm-hmm, or when any problem's going to end, and you'll get your money back then. But it's easy. I mean, I had a couple recently, this problem, and we agreed in the end they decided that we're going to go the bankruptcy route because, okay, it was just, everything was going to prop up the business. So they bit the bullet. And they found then, each of them was out to earn $60,000 or $70,000 in their bankruptcy period. Whatever. And they're living a far happier life than they've had in years. This is, yes, the best thing they ever did. So I don't believe that the family home should be put at risk. There's also the factor of the children. Yes. A family home is their little castle. It's their safe place, and to put that at risk and to tell children you have to move because the business has failed. Yes. And banks are fair weather sailors.
Okay.
So when you put up the home, something goes wrong, they come knocking on the door.
Yes. Yeah. So that's good advice. So listeners out there that know someone in financial hardship or experiencing that, and you're thinking about borrowing a little bit, the bank, even though the banks will give you that credit on your home loan, think long and hard about it, and even reach out to people like Bryan if you're not sure, because it's the quote says, it does cast a shadow on even the sunniest field, and the children are precious, as you point out. On the subject of children, I wonder if you could talk a bit about education. Are you aware if money management and wealth creation concepts are being taught in schools these days? Do you have any sense of that?
I have no sense of it. There are attempts made. I know. I mean, again, going back to what Scott Pape has a thing about it too, and he argues that the banks. There's one particular bank he mentioned should not be allowed to go into the school and introduce these savings plans. But what I believe, now I got grandchildren, I got 7 grandchildren, yeah, wow, and I got 3 of them are at the age where, or maybe 5 of them now, are at the age where they have some concept of money. So most education for kids comes at the kitchen table, yes, or the dining room table, right? So I believe what parents should do is change the language about money in the children, give them the best education that way. An example of that would be where, again, I mentioned the thing of the social engagement. So the school holidays are on at the moment as we're talking. and there's a show on called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which probably costs $200 to take it for $300 to take family to. Now, if the kids say, can we go to that, mum and dad? The answer should not be, no, we can't afford it. You should never say that to a child. You should say, well, no, we won't go to that because we choose to spend our money in a different way.
Yes.
You've got to get rid of the scarcity thing with children and the fact that when you get money, it's to spend. We've got to change that whole thinking. So we've also got to introduce presuppositions, but that comes from NLP, about saying we can have that or we can have that.
Yes.
It's A or B. I know you get it in sales a lot, but it applies with children.
Yes.
So that education, and to be seen to do it, to be heard saying to someone on the phone, no, we won't go out to dinner. We've chosen to do something with the family instead, or we've chosen to save our money for a holiday.
Yes.
That's the biggest education. Now, it's really interesting. I went to a school some years ago down in Tagulawa, which is about an hour and a half, 2 hours out of Brisbane, and to talk about money. And these were grade 11 and 12. And of course, the one thing I wasn't going to talk about was superannuation, because it's of no interest to kids. So I delivered this great talk. And then I asked for questions. What did I get the questions on? Superannuation. And I couldn't work this out till driving back that night in the car. I realized what it was. These had all come from, they were all rural families where serious conversations took place about money all the time. Farmers have to budget and plan and all that. And this whole thing about superannuation, they want to know where the best place, because they were starting to work part-time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was really interesting insight for me.
Yes. So the schools really aren't picking up the ball with that, and they may not anytime soon. It's really important for the parents to take responsibility.
And I'm not even sure that that would work in the schools, Joe,
Yeah.
because they're influenced by what they see at home
Sure.
with their friends,
Yes.
their relatives, and their own family.
Yes, and sometimes the family won't be singing from the same song sheet as the school teacher, so that just creates a problem for the child in terms of trust. So I can see the answer to that is that we need to start at home, and we need to work at home, and early concepts like assets and liabilities, savings plans, investment, things like that are things that children need to understand from their parents.
There's a great section in the book called The New Psychology of Money by an English professor, Adrian Furnham, and he talks about the ages at what children are able to understand money.
Yes.
And it's not till their early teens.
Yeah, right.
Now, we got to build better habits before they get to their early teens, so they can, when they do get the concept, they understand why they're going to be better off because they've got good habits.
Yeah, that's good. I was just remembering one of my own children. I have 3 daughters, and I taught them the difference, tried to teach them the difference between an asset and liability, which is it's a bit of a foreign concept, but we decided assets were things that you purchased that didn't lose their value straight away, and liabilities are things that lost their value almost immediately. And I remember one night we were at this venue, and my daughter kept wanting $1 to put into this claw machine that came down and grabbed, chocolate bars, and then there was a slider that kind of pushed things out, and the return ratio was about 1 in 20, and she kept coming back for money. And I said, are you putting this money into an asset or a liability? She said, it's a liability, Dad, but I'm going to win. And I said, I did have a rule. I said, if I give you money towards a liability, you pay me back double. In other words, it costs you twice as much to spend that money. But if you invest money in an asset, I'll tip in another 100% in the investment. So they learned early on that I would give them a reward if they spent their money on assets, and I would penalise them if they put money into liabilities. I didn't say they couldn't spend money on things that added no value, but when they did that, they paid double for it. And even though they didn't understand assets and liabilities in the real world, they had a real sense of the pain and pleasure they got from trying to understand the difference between the two.
I can remember as a child
Yes.
when pay packets were pay packets.
Yeah.
They actually had these cash and coins, like notes and coins in the pay packet. My mother would get my dad's pay packet every week. He was paid weekly, and she had these Maxwell House coffee jars,
Yes.
labelled clothing, medical, food, and she kept them up high enough so we couldn't reach them. But that struck me ever since. And when I run a money program with people,
Yes.
I explain about those things. Again, Scott Pape talks about it as buckets,
Yes.
but these are quite specific buckets. And I think you should sit down with children and explain all the denominations of the notes and how many make what, because all kids see is somebody waving this magic card.
Yes.
It's called touch and go. You touch it, your money goes. Right? Or pay wave, right? Wave it away. Wave it away. So I think that to have cash in a house would be what I would do.
Yeah, that's great. So, it's been pretty comprehensive in terms of the ground we've covered in such a short space of time. And I just wonder if there's any other wisdom that you can share with us around this experience of aging and money that we haven't already touched upon. Is there anything else you could add?
Yeah, I've got a belief. Now, I've always worked with individuals and small businesses. I mean, I've done some groups, but I've never been in the corporate. Now, I see the corporate, government and all that as macro.
Yes.
And I see the advisors, people like you, myself, the psychologists that work with people one-to-one as the micro. Mm-hmm. So we've all got to forget about the macro and think about the micro. Think about what you can do to make your life easier or better. So to me, you should read,
Yes.
particularly on general stuff on financial skills, like the First Links newsletter from Morningstar, and that's got a great website, got some really easy to read information. Have some kind of system, as I said, with the coffee jars maybe. But to realize that money's a resource, mm-hmm. It's not an objective. It's oil that keeps everything going. In other words, a time gone by where farmers would only put enough stuff in the barn that they were going to use for the year, and they just made sure they had enough of the right kind of stuff. So I think it's the same with money.
Yeah.
Lower your expectations. Don't compare yourself to anybody else,
yeah.
And be happy with what you have. I had a lady who worked for me during the GFC. She'd worked for me for a number of years, managing a boarding house that I've been. Now, Faye was a lovely lady. She was divorced. She lived in a place and a great manager. And I asked her, how was she feeling during the GFC? Was she worried? And she said to me, why would I be worried? And I said, well, all this stuff going on. But she said, I haven't got any money to worry about. Now, I gave that lady a substantial bonus 1 year after the sale of her property because she helped me build up the business. It was gone in a week. And we're talking like over 25 grand, right? And it was gone in a week because she said, I made up my mind. I don't need money. And I've got a sister and a daughter who need it more than I do. Mm. So I've given it to them. And she was as happy as happy. Yeah. She was always happy. Yes. So to me, you lower your expectations and don't compare yourself to the Joneses or anybody else.
Thank you, Bryan, for helping to create a brighter future on a number of levels. If you're tuning in, obviously the things Bryan shared are really interesting. So if that resonates with where you're at, you can make contact with Bryan at www.bryanworn.com. That's BRYANWORN.com. And if you have money questions around business, life, relationships, or retirement, and would like to make a genuine difference in your life right now, I think you've got a special offer for us, you mentioned.
Well, I knew I'd have to come on your show. No, seriously, I run half day, like 2 to 3 hour strategy sessions, one-to-one with people, and helps them get clear on where they are, where they want to go to, and how to get there.
Great.
Now, you're the strategy guy. One thing I like about your strategy, it ties in with mine, it's about implementation. So I give them steps to do at the end of that. It's not just a talk best. So I normally charge $1,200 for that. And for your listeners, all they got to do is mention the strategy guy when they're booking in, and they'll get a 50% discount.
Oh, that's very generous. So 50% off on Bryan's regular entry price. That's fantastic. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. So if you have a big idea that helps create a brighter future and you would like to be part of the program, please contact me via my website, thestrategyguy.com.au. And finally, Bryan Worn, once again, a big thank you for today.
Pleasure, John. It's always fun talking with you.
Cheers.